Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Ram, rat, boar, dog, dragon. Faster with those seals, Kit, bellowed the demon. Naruto leapt up into the air just in time to dodge a flurry of shuriken thrown his direction by Kyuubi's simulated attacker. The knives whizzed off into the blackness of the formless training ground where they disappeared harmlessly. Horse, bird, snake. The enemy ninja jumped up in hot pursuit, rearing back and flinging out a sly-bladed whip from within the confines of his black sleeves. Naruto saw it coming but was already in mid-jump, unable to do anything other than finishing the jutsu. He's going to cut you to ribbons. Naruto glanced up as the enemy nin soared straight at him with blinding speed, the sly whip sailing ahead, mere feet from his face. Kit, ram. Instantly, the nin in black hurtled down towards the ground like a meteor. His body split the whining air as he fell, and quick as a thought he set against the floor with a thunderous crash accompanied by the sound of bones shattering like cheap balsa. Naruto flipped in midair and gracefully landed alongside the crushed corpse and glanced up towards Kyuubi's enormous cage. How was that? He asked confidently. Kyuubi flicked one tail and seed his head to get a better look at the until recently moving enemy. He sniffed the air and examined every aspect of the battleground for a full 3 minutes before so much as looking at Naruto. Not as bad as it could have been, rumbled the fox, though honestly I wish you'd used enough force to split the body like a sausage as you should have. That would have been far more satisfying. Maybe, but for the sake of my stomach I'm glad I didn't, said Naruto as he stood up, plus this way I didn't use up a whole lot of chakra, and that guy is still very yes. Kyuubi emanated his trademark purring laugh. You quadrupled the force of gravity on his body more than 50 times over, said the fox, he said into the ground weighing almost 15 of your tons. Naruto glanced at the body as Kyuubi let it vaporize into the gloom and couldn't help but grin. I did it the first time, he muttered, I actually managed to pull one of the old master's moves on my first try. Don't let it go to your head, Kit, that was a simple one, and you used less than a quarter of the energy a master would have thought necessary. On top of those, you performed the seals too slowly and you were clumsy about them. Way to K the mood, chuckled the genin. By now he was used to tolerating Kyuubi's chidings, if for no other reason than because he knew the fox meant well. But even so, Kyuubi hesitated and then looked away. For a first attempt it was an acceptable job, and I'll grant you that odds are that you'll never have to use as much energy as the masters. But you really must work on improving the speed at which you can perform hand seals, that or find a way to bypass them altogether. I am trying, said Naruto, drawing the golden sword from the sheath on his back. Seals have never really been one of my strong points, but I'm giving it my best effort. The blonde thought for a second, then looked up at the fox. Was that the same technique you forced me to use earlier, when I was insisting you teach me? The Kadari no Jutsu. Yes, though I used it at its full potential. So you made me use more than 4 times the energy I did this time. Why in the world would anyone need to someone into the ground with 60 tons of force? Asked Naruto. What I used was more than enough to K anyone. Actually, Kit, the technique is exponentially proportional to how much chakra you put into it. You used a quarter of the normal energy and got 15 tons worth of weight behind the enemy's fall. Using the full attack would be more than 16 times that. Even so, said Naruto, amazed by the power, it just seems like it's overkill. Maybe so, maybe not, growled Kyuubi, just remember that people were considerably more resilient all those years ago than you are today. I guess. That's incredible. So were they. Now are you set to try again? Sure. I guess, said Naruto as he readied for another round. Good. Now this time don't use it until a few minutes into the battle to give things time to develop some realism. Naruto nodded. What Kyuubi didn't tell him is that there were going to be multiple attackers this time to force a focus on executing the seals quickly and effectively. SC. Naruto woke early the next morning, nearly 3 hours before sunrise. He got up off the couch, went to the bathroom and bathed as quietly as he could, given the running water, then walked to the closet by the door to the garden that Mrs. Yamanaka had given him to keep his clothes in and put on his standard attire. "You're up awfully early," said Ino, coming down the stairs just as Naruto finished putting his orange jacket on. "Is everything all right?" Naruto nodded and closed the closet door. "Yeah, I just couldn't really sleep well." "Nervous about the test today?" asked Ino. "Not really," said Naruto, "it doesn't sound like it'll be anything we can't handle. Besides, Kakashi-sensei said it was going to be a survival test, and the last thing he labeled like that was a contest to get some bells from him, which wasn't too bad. So you think it'll be something like that?" "Yeah, that'd be my guess. I'm thinking that it'll probably be us against some Chunin or Junin and we'll have to try and get something like a scroll from him, or guard a scroll from him." Ino just thought for a second and sat down on a chair opposite the couch. "Well, this should be fun. I just hope it's not Kakashi-sensei." "Yeah," Naruto laughed, "after Sakura, Sasuke and I tricked him he'd be on full guard. In fact, I'll bet that's what this is about." "What do you mean?" asked Ino. "He probably wants a rematch." Naruto chuckled. Ino shook her head. "I don't think so," she said. "Kakashi-sensei doesn't seem that petty to me. It most likely has something to do with the Chunin exams coming up in a few days." "Chunin exams?" asked Naruto. "What are those?" Ino was taken aback a little, not sure what to say. "You don't know about the Chunin exams?" she stammered after a moment. Naruto shook his head hesitantly. "Well, they're the tests the villages of the Alliance hold twice a year to decide which genin get to be Chunin." "Oh," said Naruto, "why does no one tell me these things?" Ino smiled. "Well, if you listened in class back during the academy days you would have known," she said, playfully elbowing his arm. "Where would you be without me to tell you these things?" Naruto grinned. "Hey, I don't really know. Probably back in my burned up little apartment trying to figure out what to do now." Ino chuckled. "I'm glad you're not. I like you right where you are." "I don't mind where I'm at one bit either," said the boy. "We try to be welcoming," said Ino as Naruto took a seat on the couch. "After all, this is just as much your home as mother's and mine. We wouldn't want you anywhere else." Naruto just smiled and sat back on the couch. He sighed just a little and thought to himself about everything that had happened since his apartment had blown up what seemed like ages ago. "I realize it might not be much," said Ino, misinterpreting his silence to be a negative, "but you're always welcome here." No, said Naruto, sitting up and facing her quickly. "You have no idea how much it means to me. You and your mother have been nothing but kind to me for a long time, and I appreciate it a lot." The two slipped into a slightly awkward silence after Naruto had finished. Ino wasn't sure how to respond, and had been swept over by a sudden uneasiness in her stomach. It wasn't much unlike stage fright, except that Naruto was her only audience and she couldn't seem to think of anything to say that she hadn't already said once or twice. Naruto was in a similar predicament in that he'd already said everything he could think to say, and he didn't really want to look foolish by suddenly changing the subject and shifting to a new topic. The end result was that the pair of them sat in the quiet living room, staring at each other without starting up a new conversation. Soon, however, the awkwardness began to slowly fade and Naruto found himself more and more comfortable just looking at Ino, memorizing her features, and smiling at her. It was only then that the realization struck him that he was actually smiling and he wasn't sure why. He also noticed that Ino was grinning back at him and he, for whatever reason, couldn't help but think that she was having thoughts about him that were similar to his own about her. "Are you kids all right?" The two of them turned to see Mrs. Yamanaka, dressed in a fluffy purple robe, descending the stairs in the gloom. "I thought I heard voices down here," she said. "I'm just glad it's you two and not all the ghosts I keep dreaming about." The woman smiled and Ino chuckled. "No worries," said the girl. "We won't let the big bad monsters get you now, will we?" Naruto sat by and watched as the two Yamanakas chuckled to themselves. The joke had been totally lost on him, but he wasn't feeling quite bold enough to ask and risk looking foolish. "You two are up a little early, don't you think?" said Mrs. Yamanaka. "You don't have to leave for almost an hour and a half." "We know," said Ino, "but neither of us could really sleep any longer, and this way at least we'll be more awake for the thing today." Mrs. Yamanaka nodded and took a seat opposite Sir Daughter on the couch next to Naruto. "Which reminds me," she said, Reaching under the sofa and fumbling around for something, Momo stopped by a while ago and gave me a package for the two of you. She said it was in case you ever needed any help in a tight spot. Momo, said Ino, you're trying to tell me she actually left the weapon shop. Mrs. Yamanaka smiled and nodded, a miracle I know, but it just tells me that she really wanted to make sure you got whatever it is she has in store for you. Ah, here it is. She pulled out from beneath the sofa a long and slender box wrapped in brown packing paper and set it on her lap. Momo said not to give it to you as soon as you got back since you'd probably need time to get used to being home again. So she stopped by while we were in the wave? Asked Naruto. She did, said Mrs. Yamanaka, splitting the tape, holding it shut with her fingernail and setting the now open box on the coffee table before them. Naruto and Ino both stood up and leaned over to get a better look at what was inside. What exactly is all this? Asked Ino, reaching down and pulling out what looked to be a silky, long-sleeved shirt made of some pitch-black material with a silver insignia, matching the red swirl on Naruto's jacket, on the back. Naruto held up another shirt in one hand, smaller than the one Ino had, and bearing on the back an intricately designed string of knots in the shape of a hawk. With the other hand he pulled out a pair of pants as black as the shirt but tailored a bit more loosely. Looks like she got you some new clothes, said Mrs. Yamanaka, and Anbu gear too unless I miss my guess. How sweet of her. Naruto set the shirt and pants down. There's more, he said as he reached back in and held up yet another pair of pants and a black leather sack. So I guess we each get our own suit, said Naruto, noticing that one shirt and one set of pants were both smaller than the other, but what's in the sack? Open it up, said Ino as she sorted out the clothes. Naruto pulled on the drawstrings holding the purse-sized bag shut and began to lay the contents out beside the box on the table. The first item was a thin roll of what looked like metal wire, followed shortly by a roll of white STSS of cloth and a note written on white paper. Mrs. Yamanaka picked up the note and scanned over it while Ino and Naruto sorted through the articles on the table trying to make sense of exactly what everything was and what it was meant to do. The suits, said Mrs. Yamanaka looking up, are tailor-made for the two of you and woven from the same material that Anbu Black Ops use on A-class missions. The wire is a specially treated kind of aluminum alloy, very flexible but stronger than anything you can get on the open market. This stuff wasn't cheap. What about the white cloth? Asked Ino. Mrs. Yamanaka read on and then began, apparently it's a special kind of fabric adept at channeling chakra. The Hyugas use it during times of war to aid in fighting with chakra, namely their Gyuken style. But neither of us knows how to use that, said Naruto. Does it do anything else? It does indeed. It makes it easier for you to redirect chakra to, so molding your chakra for complicated techniques won't be so much of a challenge, the woman read directly from the note. What does that mean? Asked Ino, like we don't have to do seals to use a jutsu. Naruto's heart nearly leapt into his tea. If these wraps could bypass the need for him to use seals, then using the Kadari would be infinitely easier, not to mention all the other jutsus he wanted to learn. That would be awesome. Naruto cheered. I don't think so. It says here that you still have to do everything except mold the energy, said Ino's mother, just focus raw chakra into the wraps and perform the seals, then let them do the rest. Darn, said Naruto, but even so that will make things a lot less difficult. No kidding, said Ino, no more worrying about molding, just use the energy and go for it. Mrs. Yamanaka chuckled and looked up from the note. I don't think a, thank you, card will quite cover this one. This is all really great, said Naruto, we should definitely take her out to dinner or something. I don't think she'd accept, said Ino playfully. Why not? Asked Naruto. The thought of the old woman not approving of him was enough to make him ill and it suddenly showed on his face. Don't worry, said Mrs. Yamanaka, she adores the two of you, and she even told me that she wished you, Naruto, were actually part of the family. Naruto smiled and tried not to blush. She's just a total recluse, laughed Ino. She's a great old lady but her people skills are a little lacking. Even so, said the token male of the group, I'd say we owe her big. Maybe if you stopped by and said hi after the survival test, said Mrs. Yamanaka, she might not act like it but that would make her day. I'd say that can be arranged, said Ino, but for now we should probably change into this new stuff, grab something to eat and get going. If we're early maybe we can size up what's going on. Good idea, said Naruto and Mrs. Yamanaka in unison. SC. This stuff feels really good, said Naruto, as he and Ino walked down the street side by side. It breathes like nothing else but isn't too cold. Both Naruto and Ino were attired in their new outfits, though Naruto had refused to go outside without his trademark orange jacket, and Ino had elected to wear her standard purple skirt and top over the jumpsuit. And you look pretty good in it too if you want my opinion, said Ino. Naruto grinned and scratched the back of his head like he always did when he was trying to think of something to say. Thanks, he said, you don't look half bad yourself. Half bad? Ino playfully gasped, are you kidding? I look dang good. I can really see myself falling in love with these clothes. Maybe we'll have to ask your grandmother for some more then, said Naruto. I'll admit, they're a nice change from the same thing every day. Yeah, muttered Ino as she walked a little closer to him. Naruto, she asked, changing subjects. He looked over at her and smiled warmly. What's up? Do you ever get the feeling that things just aren't quite right anymore? Like this isn't the way it's supposed to be? Naruto seed his head off to one side curiously. What do you mean? I don't think I follow. I don't know, said Ino after a brief pause. Sakura getting wounded and taken off your team, my team falling apart and my being put with you and Sasuke. I'm not complaining at all, but doesn't it seem a little unreal or like we're not supposed to be like this? Naruto thought for a second and rolled the question around in his mind for a few moments before he glanced back at her. Does it really matter? He asked. Whether or not things are really the way they're supposed to be isn't something I think we can really choose. So I wouldn't say it's anything to be worried about. I mean, maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but the way I see it, all that really matters is that we try to do the best we can in everything we can. Ino hesitated and looked down at the ground as they walked. Do you believe in fate, Naruto? Asked Ino. No, he answered without faltering. I like to think that things happen the way they happen because of what we do, not because of some kind of grand scheme of things. Muttered Ino, I guess. Why do you ask? Wondered Naruto, not entirely sure what had brought this to her mind. I just keep thinking, she said, almost to herself, that something is going to happen, something bad. Naruto tried to think of something to say but came up short for a minute and instead reached over and took her hand. She looked up at him, genuine worry showing in her eyes. I don't want anything bad to happen to you, Naruto, she whispered, and I just keep having these feelings that something horrible is going to happen and a lot of people are going to get hurt. It would kill me if you were one of them. Naruto squeezed her hand and she clenched her fingers around his, tears welling up in her eyes. What's bothering you? He asked, suddenly defensive of her. I'm not going to let you get hurt again, she said in an undertone. My father nearly killed you, and he betrayed Konoha in the process. I'm not going to let you get hurt again. Naruto stifled a gasp as his stomach suddenly began to churn. Kit, Kyuubi exclaimed, she knows. I don't know how, but if she knows that Inoki tried to kill you, then she knows that Sakura killed him. Guard every last word you say here. How he stammered, how did you find out about that? He asked in a shaking voice. No one knows that. Both Genin stopped walking and just stood there in the predawn hours waiting for the other to break down and say something. The wind gusted up and blew a loose scattering leaves across the sidewalk. I'm not stupid, Naruto, she said firmly but not unkindly. I appreciate you trying to protect my feelings, but after we saw Sakura drunk at Ichiraku, I went around and asked a few questions. Sakura wouldn't talk to me, and all I could get out of Mrs. Haruno was that she was a little depressed over the recent mission. After that I went straight to the Hokage, who told me everything. If it would have been possible, Naruto's heart would have sunk even lower in his chest. The boy's breathing stilled nearly to a stop, and his mouth went suddenly dry. I don't hold it against you, she continued, taking a hit like that for her. And I don't hold it against her for killing him. It was a battle after all, and I'm not even really bothered by the fact that she almost SD for you. I'll admit it doesn't sit too well with me, but whatever. Ino, Naruto tried to jump in, but she reached up and put a finger on his lip to silence him. Please, she said quietly, I'm trying not to get jealous here. Just let me say that, Naruto, I don't know how to say this, and I don't want to sound stupid or anything. A single tear sped down her cheek. I don't ever want anything to happen to you, Naruto, she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace and burying her face in his jacket. Naruto, for a second at least, had no idea what was going on and merely stood there with his arms hovering above her shoulders. Suddenly he realized he was actually thinking about trying to get her back to arm's length, so he quickly rejected the idea and wrapped his arms around her. Don't worry, he murmured into her, I'm going to be there for you no matter what, I promise. She looked up from the wet patch she quietly cried onto his jacket and looked into his eyes. No, she whispered, no, I don't want you to get hurt for me. Naruto, I love you. For just a moment there was a brief but stunned and somehow peaceful silence as they just stood there with each other. There was no wind, nor had the sun risen as to illuminate them in the darkness of a building's shadow. Naruto's mind was almost numbed, but not unpleasantly so. He found himself ruptured up in the moment and suddenly relieved that she cared about him. What was more, Naruto only then realized that he felt the same way for her. He never wanted to see her hurt or in any kind of trouble. He wanted nothing more than to be there for her forever. Ino, he whispered, you have no idea how much I love you too. All of their surroundings seemed to somehow slow, or stop altogether, frozen in a moment neither Genin ever wanted to end. The lonely mourning dove perched in the nearby oak tree cooed softly in the stillness of the morning, providing the only ambience for what seemed like miles around, aside from the skittering of little claws as the rats and mice scurried about the sidewalk looking for the next bit of food. Glad to see you could join us, shouted an apparently grumpy Sarutobi Asuma as a figure emerged from the gloom and strode onto the training field. You're the last to arrive. It was Akamaiki Chuji, standing an inch taller than the last time his old mentor had seen him, and wearing the green and silver uniform of a town guardsman. The boy smiled and waved at those gathered on the field, then raised a muscled arm to salute the Hokage. The old man saluted Chuji back and beckoned him over. Morning. He greeted them all, so I'm guessing that we can get started. Good morning, Chuji, said the Hokage, you're looking well. I've already lost a lot of weight, said the guard, the first weeks of basic training are really intense. So I'm told, but enough with the pleasantries, responded the old man, stepping away from the group of 12 ninja. I'm glad you all could be so punctual, and I'm even more pleased that each and every one of our rookie 9, as well as their Junin instructors could make it here. Sasuke glanced down the line and examined the faces of those assembled in wonder. It hadn't been very long at all since they had graduated the academy, but already everyone looked different. Naruto and Ino standing there hand in hand in their new clothes were the most obviously changed aside from Chuji who'd had a growth spurt. But then again, thought the raven-haired Uchiha, I hadn't noticed that Hyuga girl. And indeed, Hinata had undergone a subtle but somehow radical transformation. Maybe it was that she wore her beige jacket wide open, revealing the blue t-shirt underneath, or perhaps it could have been how she now carried herself, walking at her full height with her arms crossed almost haughtily in front of her, but neither was what Sasuke was staring at. Her eyes had him completely transfixed. They were almost no different than any other Hyugas, but at the same time they were far more intense than any he'd ever seen. She has the look of some kind of creature, thought Sasuke. I've only ever seen eyes like those on Naruto. The Uchiha managed to keep from shivering at the sudden chill that shot down his spine, and turned back to the Hokage. Now on to business, continued the old man, you have all been summoned here this morning to engage in a little examination, if you would. Now don't worry, how you do won't affect whether or not you're sent back to the academy, but it will determine if you're allowed to participate in the upcoming Chunin exams. Naruto nudged Ino's arm. Good call, he whispered. As I was saying, said Sarutobi after clearing his tea, this will in no way damage your career any more than a bad grade on a test at the academy, which as we all now know doesn't really amount to much. There was a bit of a snicker from the group at that. Let's face it, said the Hokage, shrugging his shoulders, all of that book learning is nice and provides a firm foundation for learning the basics of the art of shinobi, but it doesn't by itself prepare you for what being a ninja is. Now each of your instructors has said they'd like to refer you for the Chunin exams next week. That's fine and I have nothing against it, however, I would like to see if each of you is up to it. What we've gathered here today to do is give you a taste of what you'll be up against to see if you can really handle what may be coming your way. Now without more delay, Kakashi will be providing you with the instructions to today's test. The old man stepped back as the masked Genin stepped forward, pulling out of his vest a box about the size of cigarette case, and made of what looked like mahogany. He opened it up and displayed inside a row of 9 rolls of paper, bound tight with silver thread. These, said the copy nin in a commanding tone, are your objectives. Each one is no bigger than one of Asuma's smokes, and can easily be concealed almost anywhere on one's person. He began to walk down the line of Genin and handed him each one of the little scrolls. Now please take a moment to put it in some fold of your clothes or in a pouch, or wherever you'd like, and preferably somewhere that isn't easily accessible to someone trying to steal it from you, because that is the objective of each and every one of you, to steal the scroll of the opponent to which you have been assigned. Everyone looked around nervously, not sure how to react, until Naruto finally shuffled the scroll into the small pocket on the underside of his new shirt. Ino did likewise, and after a few seconds, everyone had cleverly hidden their scrolls somewhere about themselves. And finally, said Kakashi, you've been sectioned off into one-on-one matches that will take place one after the other until the end, when the winner of the first match will face off against the 9th Genin. First up will be Chuji and Ino. The Yamanaka girl gulped nervously, but stepped up at the same time the new town guard did. Kakashi waved his hands and the remainder of the group took a dozen or so paces back to give the two of them room. Not the way I'd planned on spending my morning, muttered Ino. No techniques are barred, shouted Kakashi, just don't K each other. These are meant to challenge you, not destroy you. Ino and Chuji dashed to opposite ends of the field and readied themselves, waiting for Kakashi's signal. Sorry about this, Ino, yelled Chuji. The girl just let a small smirk cross her face before hiding it behind a stoic glare. Begin, yelled Kakashi. Chuji was already performing a series of seals and charging forward at Ino, who had leapt up in the air and flung out a flurry of shuriken to slow the Akamaki down while she concentrated on funneling chakra into the wraps around her hands. Not that easy, bellowed Chuji, who had just completed the jutsu and exploded to 4 times his normal size. The boy curled into a tight ball and, in true Akamaki style, was thundering straight towards Ino like a tank. The shuriken didn't slow him at all. Hissed Ino when she saw she wouldn't have time to complete the seals. The girl raised her hands and unleashed the chakra upwards in a burst of wind that propelled her back to the ground just in time to sidestep Chuji's charge. She twirled and watched as he passed, trying to tell exactly where he'd hidden the scroll. The only problem was that because of his immense size, it was impossible to tell. Quickly the meat tank pivoted and reversed directions, jetting back at Ino, who nimbly jumped to the side in time to avoid being crushed. As the rest of the group watched the contest, Kakashi walked up slowly behind Naruto and Sasuke and knelt down between the two of them to be at their eye level. Hey, said the copy nin, beckoning for their attention. The 2 genin turned in unison to face him and asked what he needed. I just have a few quick rules just for the 2 of you. Like what, Kakashi-sensei? Asked Naruto. About what the 2 of you are capable of. Like we said earlier, these tests aren't designed to get anyone hurt, including yourselves, so I'm going to have to ask you two to tone it down a bit. Naruto, please don't use any of that unique chakra of yours, and Sasuke, don't activate the Mangekyu. Both of those abilities are dangerous to you and the person you're up against, okay? Both genin nodded an affirmative. Good, said Kakashi smiling through his mask. Oh, and Naruto, no swords. The 3 ninja turned back to the battle just in time to see Chuji rolling under Ino as the girl flipped through the air over him and pointed 2 fingers at the guard. There was a puff of blue smoke from her fingertips and an incandescent blue burst of light from a small point on Chuji's back. The Akamaki yelped in pain and transformed back to his normal size. Carried by inertia, he rolled along the ground a minute longer as Ino performed a few seals and aimed her hands at Chuji. What the hell was that? Asked Chuji, jumping to his feet and putting his hands together in front of him. Wouldn't you like to know? Said Ino. Chuji charged forward, as Ino's hands glowed blue for only a second. She looked between her fingers at Chuji and grinned. Perfect, I'm going to have to let, she muttered just before the hefty nin suddenly had an explosive burst of speed and plowed straight into her. The girl was sent hurtling to the side like a tossed rag doll as the freight train Akamaki kept rumbling forward, undeterred. He changed course and began to circle around for another pass as Ino stumbled to her feet and wiped a drop of blood away from her split lip. She quickly ran through her mind what had just happened, trying to find a way around Chuji's brute force. Much to her dismay, Chuji again accelerated inhumanely quickly when he came within striking distance, though this time Ino was a bit more prepared and jumped high in the air, hoping to hit him with another jutsu as he plowed underneath. A grin crossed the guard's face and he leapt in the air at Ino just as her feet left the ground, and as she hadn't time to focus any chakra, Ino was helpless to avoid him. Chuji slammed into her, and in mid-air performed a quick series of seals, again transforming into the meat tank just before crashing to the ground. He felt Ino impact the earth beneath him and immediately returned to normal and rolled away, revealing Ino's scuffed form lying in the shallow crater left by the encounter. "Ino!" shouted Naruto, "are you okay?" The girl rolled to her side and pushed herself up on one arm. "I'm just fine," she shouted back at the whole group, though mainly at Naruto, as she held out her right hand and opened it, revealing a single, cigarette-sized scroll. "WHAAAT. Chuji exclaimed in shock as his eyes went comically wide. He began to madly search his person and pulled out a small bag from his sleeve and turned it upside down. Frantically he opened it and shook it, looking for his scroll. The Hokage and all three Genin just smiled as Naruto began shouting congratulations to her. Ino nodded and walked back to the group, with the guard not too far behind her. "Sorry," said Ino warmly to Chuji, "about that." Chuji grinned and shrugged his shoulders. "I shouldn't have been so reckless, but oh well. Are you okay?" "A little ruffled but fine," she responded, then smiled and turned to Naruto. "That was fast," said the Uzumaki, "but impressive." "Thanks," Ino grinned, "glad you thought so. Maybe next time." "Next," shouted Kakashi, "will be Naruto and Hinata." "Oops," said Naruto, "gotta go." The blonde boy jogged out to the center of the field, and looked back at the crowd. He waited for just a moment for his opponent to show, but Hinata just stood in the center of the group with her arms crossed and her eyes shut lazily. Hinata-chan, Kurenai prodded kindly. "I don't think so," said the Hyuga girl in an almost amused tone, "I'm not really into public humiliation." The Hokage narrowed an eyebrow and looked at her out of the corner of a glance, while Kurenai tried to move her on with little gestures. "Oh come on," shouted Naruto playfully, "I'm not that good." Hinata opened her eyes and glared at Naruto for just a minute before grinning just a little at him. "I didn't say you were. I was just hoping to spare myself some energy," she muttered as she strode out onto the field, taking off the Titan jacket and tossing it to the ground. She took a stance a few paces from him, raised her hands in a typical Gyuken pose. "Byakugan," she mumbled. Naruto stared in wonder as suddenly dark lines creased an outline of Hinata's irises, and couldn't help but stare as veins popped up all around her eyes. He quickly regained himself though and clenched his fist ready for the fight. Kakashi raised his hand in preparation to begin. "Kit," Kyubi sounded in the back of Naruto's mind. "Be extremely careful here, there's something not right about this girl and I won't interfere per your sensei's request." "It'll be fine," thought Naruto, "Hinata-chan isn't the type to." "Begin," shouted the Junin. Immediately Naruto felt an icy burst in his chest. Directly in front of him he saw Hinata, smirking just a little, and as Naruto looked down he saw that she'd rammed 2 fingers firmly against his sternum. In shock he didn't have any time to react, and even before the first blow of pain had faded, Hinata disappeared and Naruto suddenly felt the same pain in his back directly between his shoulder blades. He started to turn his head to see what was happening, but as he did, Hinata struck again, this time on his right shoulder. His whole arm went numb and there immediately followed a shot of cold in his left thigh. Dazed, Naruto began to fall to his left, but even then Hinata didn't relent. All over Naruto began to feel jets of freezing pain burst through his body, and before he'd hit the ground he could feel less than a third of his limbs. His hands twitched madly, and he searched desperately for a second to figure out what had just happened. 1 second he was fine, and the next, meek little Hinata was pummeling him. "Come on Naruto," the Genin mentally screamed as his body hit the ground with a thud. "Get it together. Think. Figure this out." Hinata hovered over him and set on hand on her hip. Her victory had been pathetically quick. She flicked her hair off to one side and grinned, then shifted her weight and glanced all around. "Now where have you hidden that scroll?" she asked. "I wasn't paying attention to you earlier so I don't really know, She's mocking me. Naruto realized. What happened to her? This isn't like Hinata-chan at all. Naruto growled and managed to roll onto his front and start to push himself up on his one good elbow while Hinata glowered above him and merely watched with amusement. He struggled up to his knees, not making eye contact with her. Hinata began to chuckle as he tried so hard to stand but found his legs were numbed and fumbled back to the ground in a heap. Naruto, undeterred, tried again with the same results. This isn't working, I'm paralyzed and worse, I can't mold any chakra outside my body. Then mold it on the inside, rumbled Kyubi, she's blocked your tenketsu which I'll explain later, but you can still circulate chakra inside your body, need I say more? Not in the least, Naruto grinned, if she's blocked something you'll just have to unblock it. Not what I had in mind. But it was too late. Naruto had already begun to amass all the chakra he could muster directly into his core while at the same time, suppress it and build up what felt like a massive pressure in his chest. Now, just need to. Naruto released the energy all at once, and immediately little pinpoints of pain seared over his skin as little bursts of blue energy erupted from his pores and feeling began to flood into his body again. A very surprised Hinata jumped back a few yards when her victim suddenly exploded in a blue puff of light. She raised her hands to fight as Naruto, still slightly dazed mind you, leapt to his feet and without wasting a second charged forward in a burst of midnight color. The quick retaliation, albeit uncoordinated and a little clumsy, was more than enough to catch the Hyuga off guard. Naruto's fist slammed into her jaw, sending her reeling through the air, even as Naruto pressed his hands into a seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He shouted loudly, and just then another Naruto burst into existence directly ahead of Hinata. The clone kicked fiercely and knocked Hinata to the ground. Naruto charged again and jumped up, twisting in midair in hopes of landing on her with the heels of his sandals. Yeah, shouted Ino from the sidelines, finish this up quick. Hinata glared over into the crowd, and twisted around planting her hand on the ground and sideways onto her knees just as Naruto came crashing down. She twirled around and jabbed at the clone that disappeared into a puff of smoke. Naruto put his hands together and this time summoned a wave of no less than 30 copies, who simultaneously jumped at her. Hinata's lips curled into a grin and she jumped up and twirled, this time however glowing blue as a transparent sphere formed around her. What in the? A clone mumbled as all 30 sailed closer to her. Kaiten! Shouted the Hyuga girl, and immediately the sphere exploded outwards, impacting and banishing the clones instantly. Just in time, thought Naruto. Hinata smiled as she looked down at him and began to return towards the ground. You can imagine her surprise when a single Bunshin exploded up from the ground and slammed its fist into her jaw, hurtling her even farther upwards. 1/50th normal power shouldn't be too much, shouted Naruto as he clapped his hands into the final seal, the ram. Hinata gasped, suddenly leaden as her body began to rocket towards the ground at mind-numbing speeds. She grimaced and fought to turn in mid-air. The ground was spinning closer and closer as she picked up speed like a meteor. Gaah! She nearly screamed as she landed hard on her feet, bending heavily at the knees and leaving deep divots underneath her sandals. Her arms hung like S-weights at her side as the force of the jutsu on her continued to press her down. No way, muttered Naruto, still holding the jutsu firmly in place, she should be out cold, and there's no way she should be moving. He focused a little harder and allotted more chakra to the technique, and Hinata grimaced in response. He backbent a little lower, but she refused to go down, and even went so far as to take a single step. Her foot slammed down onto the ground with a loud thud and a tremor. Naruto frowned, feeling the fatigue from maintaining the jutsu more than a few seconds beginning to wear on him, but he pressed even harder, bringing it to almost a third of what he'd used with Kyubi. Hinata growled in frustration, but stood up straight and took another booming step. She reached out with a trembling arm, her fingers not more than a yard from his face, and began to shake wildly. Her fingertips flashed blue for only a second, and Naruto suddenly jerked back as if someone had struck him in the N. He rolled back and onto the ground sputtering in shock from the attack, meanwhile the jutsu had broken and Hinata was free. Naruto leapt up, trying to ready himself to fight, but was stopped cold as Hinata slammed her open palm into his chest. He felt his heart spasm out of rhythm and suddenly he couldn't move. Hinata slashed at his shirt with just one fingernail and pulled out the tiny scroll as he stumbled backwards, clutching his chest. Winner! Yelled Asuma from the sidelines. Hinata glanced at a stunned but recovering Naruto and chuckled a little. Too bad, she whispered for only him to hear. What do you mean? He asked as loudly as he could, which was really just a hoarse whisper. She leaned in, sending a chill down his back, and whispered right into his ear. I was having fun, and we were both holding back due to the circumstances. I'd like to finish this sometime. Hinata, said Naruto as she leaned back, what's gotten into you? She just grinned again and walked back to the group, and he followed not far behind. Ino rushed up, but refrained from a hug and merely took his hand. She led him back to Sasuke and Kakashi, saying that he should probably relax. He was too dazed to really understand what anyone around him was saying, but he got the general idea. Naruto, Kakashi whispered as the Genin sat down with Ino's help, are you okay? Naruto nodded, and closed his eyes. I almost stopped the fight. Are you sure you're okay? Fine, said the Genin in a whisper, I'm glad you didn't. Next, said Kurenai, Sasuke and Shikamaru. SC. Well done. The Hokage said loudly as he stood up in front of the somewhat battered Genin and their instructors, you all performed admirably, and I won't hesitate to allow each and every one of you into the Chunin exams. As for now though, you should rest up and try not to worry too much about the days to come. The rookie nin all looked around awkwardly, not knowing if that was a dismissal or something, until Kakashi announced that they should probably get back to going about the duties now. Shikamaru, who happened to be walking in a similar direction as Sasuke, glanced over at the raven-haired boy and nodded to him. You did pretty good out there, said the Anbu trainee, you almost had me a time or two. Sasuke looked over unwelcomingly but not unkindly and nodded back. If not for the shadow of that tree I would have had you the first time. Shikamaru shrugged and kept on walking. Naruto and Ino strayed from the field together and back towards downtown. You looked good out there, said Naruto once they were out of earshot of everyone. Ino grinned and looked over at him, taking his hand and giving it a quick squeeze. You didn't look half bad yourself. Are you okay after? I'm kinda sore, but alright. I'm glad you're not hurt, she said. Come on, let's go see Momo and see if she'll patch up that shirt of yours. Naruto smiled, and thanked her for it in the first place. Remind me, said the Hokage as he walked towards his office complex with Kakashi, to summon Hiashi-san this afternoon. I wish to have a word or two with him. About Hinata? Asked the copy nin. Sarutobi gently nodded, about Hinata. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.